book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about some books that I read in a day. So this is actually a sequel to the original video I made, which was a 7 on Sunday topic. I enjoyed filming this video so much that I did want to do it in the future. However, I didn't realize how near that future time was going to be because I ended up catching the vid. It was not pleasant at all, but through that, I did have some break time, some downtime, some isolation time, and for some reason, that motivated me to read so much. And at times, I was reading books within a couple of days, but other times I was reading books within one sitting / one day, and I just could not get enough of stories. I just needed more because I needed entertainment. This video is actually purely based on that experience and the experience that has come afterwards because I still have some sort of adrenaline. Within the last month or so, I have been reading non-stop. Even though my sickness was not pleasant at all, my experience reading these books was absolutely pleasant, and I cannot wait to talk about these books and hopefully give you guys some recommendations based on the books that I talk about today. So I guess without further ado, I'm gonna get straight into the second part of the books that I read within a day. I did quickly want to sneak in a book that I read before I went through sickness. I also want to talk about my experience with Hunt the Stars by Jessie Mihalik. This is a romantic science fiction space opera novel that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I was not expecting to enjoy at all. This book, I believe, came in my March adult bookish box, and I'm so happy it did because I did not realize that I would find a new favorite, or even a favorite within the sci-fi space opera romance category. It's a very niche category if we're not talking about alien smut here. This just really excited me. I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed the plot. I really enjoyed the crew that we had in here. It just took me by surprise. I was honestly just surprised at how much I enjoyed this novel because I wasn't expecting to. That's essentially what kept me reading. I just thought to myself, yeah, I'd give it a try. It was just one of those random books that just ended up on my TBR based on it coming into a subscription service, and I have heard many great things about it, so I decided I did want to check it out myself, and I'm so happy I did because it was a wild ride. If you are wanting a good action-packed space opera that also has some good romance and also some character building moments, I would highly recommend Hunt the Stars. I cannot wait to read more by Jessie Mihalik. I've added more books on my TBR from her. And the next book I bring up is essentially the book that kicked off my reading adrenaline during my recent experience with bad sickness. And that, my friends, is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Nothing like a good, wholesome romance to get you going. This essentially really did help me engage myself and distract myself from what I was going through, and I'm honestly so grateful for that because I had a really fun time reading this book. And yeah, I can completely identify with anyone who stands Adam because, oh my goodness, I do too. I really appreciated Olive's journey in this novel as well. I understand that the characters don't necessarily have like the deepest personalities. They're not necessarily fully fleshed out characters. However, I just love the story. I really just enjoyed the plot for what it was. I didn't really care about the lack of personality between the two characters. I think a lot of people just base their personalities on the Star Wars characters that they're basically based off of. Some people find that weird, some people find that awesome. I personally have not watched the new Star Wars films. I didn't necessarily read it as Star Wars fan fiction. I just read it because I wanted a good story with great demisexual representation, and that is what I got, and I'm so pleased with the result of this novel. It was an absolute fun time, and I do highly recommend it if you are also wanting a quick read. I cannot wait for the companion novel, Love on the Brain. I'm hoping I get the same result as The Love Hypothesis with that book. And then after The Love Hypothesis sent me on that spiral, I ended up delving into some fantasy. I ended up rereading The Princess Will Save You, and then continuing on with The Queen Will Betray You. I read both these books within 2 separate days, okay? I read this book within a day, I read this book within a day. And what I do have to say is, holy moly, this series is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm hoping / actually betting on it that The King Will Kill You will have the same intensity. I reckon that I'm absolutely going to enjoy The King Will Kill You. However, I reckon that The King Will Kill You will absolutely destroy me from the inside. Like these two books. These two books I was hurting from. They were constantly just like stabbing me non-stop. However, what I do have to say is they got better. In this book, right, there were 2 characters that I absolutely did not like, and I just wanted to scream and just chuck this book across the room. For some people, they'd want to stop the book at that point. I think in my case, yes, I take the torture. However, I try to soldier on so I can get past those points. And that's essentially what happened with The Queen Will Betray You. I understand that that's not a selling point for the series. There are terrible opposing characters within this series. Honestly, if you don't like character building based on their opposition, this series is going to be a real tough one for you. However, it makes the victories all the more worth it. I cannot wait for the finale. But this being said, after all my babies have gone through, I need to know that they're gonna be okay. Knowing that they're going to be okay has kept me reading this series, because they go through trial after trial after trial, and I just need to know that they're gonna get out of it. And you know what? Sometimes they do, and then sometimes they don't, and then things just, they hurt. This series, all in all, is an action-packed adventure that does have moments where you are just wanting to root for the right people and absolutely despise the wrong people's guts. It is a roller coaster of emotions if you do end up getting attached. So good luck if you do end up getting attached like myself. I am extremely attached to this series. In some ways, I regret it, but in some ways, I don't. And after talking about something that was so intense, let's talk about something that's a bit lighter. I continuously read Here for the Right Reasons by Jodi McAllister because I needed to know how this romance was going to end. I found out how it started. I met Cece, and then I met Dylan, and I just needed to know that they were going to be happy together. And oh my goodness, it was a love story to remember. This pretty much takes place in a Bachelor-esque competition, a reality television set. I loved it because it very much reminded me of Australian reality television combined with the Charm Offensive. I was very much looking forward to reading this, and as I started it, I just knew I needed to know how it ended, like instantly. So I just kept on reading, I kept on soldiering on through it. It hurt. It was painful to experience what I experienced while reading this book. Like any kind of good romance novel. Because any kind of good romance is not necessarily just convenient. No, it's never only just convenient. It takes trials, it takes pain, it takes turmoil, but the end result is worth it. And that is what I felt with Jodi McAllister's Here for the Right Reasons. I needed to know how these characters were going to end up, and yeah, it was a painful experience to have to go through this in one sitting, but let me tell you, it was better that than not, because I was not going to sleep not knowing if my characters were going to be okay. Essentially, that is the main reason why I read books in one sitting anyway. I just really need to know what happens next most of the time. Here for the Right Reasons is one that I would recommend if you like reality television settings, but also if you like a good romance story. This has the perfect amount of tension, but also very likable characters. And now I'm going to talk about a book that is really hyped up here in the booktube community for very good reason. I was expecting to like this book. I did put it on my 5-star predictions TBR initially, but then all of a sudden I felt a little bit intimidated by it. I wasn't too sure why. Maybe it was because I just had really high expectations for it, and so I was very nervous about it. However, it delivered. I can confirm that I devoured Iron Widow in one sitting. This book was intense, but also it had very character-driven moments that I really did need. Even though it was very fast-paced in certain aspects, and I really wish that this book was a little bit more fleshed out, it was definitely a very enjoyable story, and I felt like it kept on coming at me with twist after twist after twist, and I really appreciated that because that is what kept me engaged. I also was very much engaged in the main characters' development and their story, and seeing them come to power. I am planning to reread it in the lead up to Heavenly Tyrant. I think all of these books I do want to reread at some point. But seriously, when Heavenly Tyrant comes out, we are gonna have the best binge read ever. This book just got me hyped up, it got me excited. I was just high on adrenaline the whole time reading this book. Kind of gave me the similar experience to Hunt the Stars or The Princess Will Save You, and honestly, that's what I look for in a good fantasy read. And speaking of hyped up books that were on my 5-star predictions TBR, I decided, ironically, that I was going to continue on with reading books from that TBR straight after Iron Widow. So I ended up picking up The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake, and what I can say is this was 100% worth the hype in my opinion. I understand that a lot of people do not like this book because they think it's overhyped, but I went into this book not really knowing much and not really expecting much. I actually had high expectations for it at the beginning of the year, and then as the traditionally published edition came out, more reviews for this book came out. Honestly, that intensified my insecurity when it came to how I would feel or what I would predict in terms of this book. However, I can say with 100% certainty that everyone's reviews really did help me manage my expectations going into this book because I was absolutely blown away by it. Usually when it comes to multiple POV books, when I'm talking about multiple POV books, I mean books that include somewhere over 3 POVs of people in a group. A lot of the time, it's really difficult for me to distinguish who's who in a situation, but let me tell you, it was hard to get lost with the Atlas 6 because every single one of these characters I felt like stood out in their own separate way, and that's what kept me reading. That's what kept me wanting to know what happened next, even though this book isn't very plot driven, as opposed to the other books that I've mentioned. A lot of the other books that I mentioned that aren't necessarily the contemporary books, those ones are very much intense and they are very much action-packed and plot-based. This book is quite the opposite. Not at all plot-based, but it's very character-driven. I did care about aspects of the plot, but I more cared about the characters' individual journeys, their stories, and where they were gonna go from there. This book is a great setup for what's gonna happen next. I have heard from early reviews regarding the Atlas Paradox that it's still going to be very character driven and not necessarily very plot based. However, I will still read it because I could use more of these characters like all day, every day. And next, I don't want to just bring up a book. I want to bring up a series that I read within a day. No guys, I didn't read each individual book in an individual day. No, I read the entire series within a day. And this was a 4-book series. I read the entire Sherlock Holmes series within 24 hours. I know. Ridiculous. I just needed to know what happened next. I mean, after reading the first book is a very good introduction to the story. My first critique of this first book initially was that Brittany Cavallaro did not write this book in Charlotte's perspective. However, she did that purposefully. And the reason why, in my opinion, I believe that she did that purposefully is because it kept the reader reading. Like, we desperately wanted to know if we were ever gonna get her perspective, but also the reader desperately wanted to know the mystery that was Sherlock Holmes herself. I do have to admit, the sequel does suffer from second book syndrome. However, the third book is the best book in the series and the finale was absolutely satisfactory. I do love this quartet. I do highly recommend it. I could take 10 books from the series any day. I just really want more Sherlock Holmes in my life. I enjoyed this series so much. I really feel like it is very much slept on. A lot of people are not talking about this series anymore. They were when it first came out, but this series needs to go down in the YA classics, in my opinion. The second last book I'm going to mention in this video today was another book subscription box pick for a month that I just decided to pick up on a whim. I received it and I was like, you know what? Reading a couple pages of that wouldn't hurt. I ended up devouring this book in a day. It is one of my new favorite books of all time, and that, my friends, is This Vicious Grace by Emily Thied. When I tell you that I knew nothing about this book going into it, I didn't whatsoever. Oh my goodness. The way I would pitch this is that it is a cross between Shatter Me and apocalyptic fantasy. I'm not going to say too much else. If you do want to read the synopsis, I went into this book completely oblivious from what it was about, and that was the best reading experience for me. It definitely is a young adult book. However, in my personal opinion, I feel like this story can be appreciated at any age. I was just absolutely blown away by it. If you also highly appreciate the Italian cultural references in Kingdom of the Wicked, This Vicious Grace is also for you because it definitely has those influences through it. I knew nothing about it, but I was absolutely blown away as I was reading it and as more was being revealed to me. And oh my goodness, once I got through to the halfway point of the novel, my jaw dropped. I still think about this book. I was gushing to Camilo about this book the day that I read it. This book pretty much took me out of a slumpy mood. It just brightened my day. I cannot stop thinking about This Vicious Grace. The Last Fenestra series is one to look out for. If you haven't checked it out yet, please check it out, because this author, Emily Thied, she's going places if she keeps on writing this good. This is her debut novel and I'm thoroughly impressed by it. And last but certainly not least, I also have to bring up a debut novel that I was thoroughly impressed by. Ironically, I read this book literally a week after This Vicious Grace and was absolutely blown away. And that, my friends, is The Blood Trials by N.E. Davenport. This is one of my favorite books of the year. Literally majority of this list that I've brought up in this video today are favorites. But I do have to say, out of all the books that I brought up in this video so far this year, this one's my favorite. I absolutely adored The Blood Trials. And you know what's even more ironic? This book is a lot longer than the other books that I mentioned. I know the other books look chunky, but this book is super chunky. It is very dense. It could essentially be 2 books with the density that it has, with the story that it has, with the layers. It's like an onion. The Blood Trials is an absolutely amazing debut novel in my opinion. If you are a fan of dystopia, or if you are a fan of the concept in stories when it comes to survival of the fittest, The Blood Trials is definitely for you. But also, if you do like fantasy, if you do like very strong political plot lines, this book is for you. It has definitely got a lot of social commentary in it. It's got everything. It's really packed with a punch. It's a sci-fi, it's a fantasy, it's a horror at times. It's got everything for everyone. But I think first and foremost, it's like a sci-fi dystopian, post-apocalyptic future world. I just absolutely adored this novel. I will not stop obsessing over it. I feel like a lot more people need to read it. Last time I checked GOODREADS, it had less than 1,000 ratings, and I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, this book has been out for like around 3 or 4 months now, and people aren't talking about it. It is really up there with books like Red Rising or The Hunger Games. If you haven't checked it out yet, if you love that kind of media, what are you doing? I mean, if you're hearing about it for the first time, okay, I'll give you a pass. Now read it. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay to the end of the video, leave me the green heart emoji because I love green. And if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers, and also I have social medias. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also GOODREADS. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at GSwizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it in a double. Started out with half and I flipped it in a double.